As we see the grid form up here, we are waiting for lights out. And we are officially underway in Silverstone. We are going to see a bunch of cars go through turn one, notorious for a lot of contact, and we already have a car around. We've got an Aston Martin around of SD Bookie. We have another car around, it looks like, with some damage. Actually, we've got several cars around. SD Bookie, General Whitney, and Ish Kabibble, so both Red Bulls and the Aston Martin included in that turn one incident. Let's take a look back at the front here. Everyone else getting through rather cleanly. Now into turn 6 here. McLaren still leading the way. Moises dropping from 2nd to 4th. And Linksworks Nightmare moving up into 3rd. And Bontempo up into 2nd. And you can see the game giving the possible race strategy there with the soft mediums and the medium hard strategy. Not always accurate, but it is possible. See there in chat, well, I do game for Extra Life, so please don't hesitate to donate through Extra Life. If you're unfamiliar with them, they help benefit benefit Children's Miracle Network hospitals across the country as well as the globe. All donations through the website go directly to Extra Life. They are an official non-for-profit charity, so any donations are tax deductible. And Dirty Liberal falling back here in the Williams with Pizza Dog now going back and forth for 6th place. Meanwhile, Daniel Bontempo up front trying to close the gap at about 2.5 tenths approximately, and now at 3.5 tenths. And Ish Kabibble, a 5-second penalty for speeding into pit lane. So if you are unfamiliar, oh, and General Whitney also getting the 5-second penalty. The end of lap 1, let's take a look at our position changes here. Looks like our big droppers besides SD Bookie, Ish Kabibble, and General Whitney going to be Scavenger, who dropped 4 spots, currently in 8th, and then Moises down 2 spots, currently in 4th. And then on the flip side of that, Lieutenant Spartacus gaining 6 spots on the opening lap, currently in 9th. And then Sunder 96 and Fino Gaming both gaining 4, currently in 12th and 13th respectively. And an interesting strategy here across the grid. Fino Gaming opting for the hard tires early, so going for a longer stint to start the race. Meanwhile, the top 4 all currently on the mediums. Dirty Liberal in 6th on the softs. Everyone else on the mediums, and then the hards, except for Fino. Or sorry, Paulie's the one on the hards. Fino is on the softs. Dirty Liberal sets the fastest lap with a 1:33.11, and DRS is enabled this time. If you're unfamiliar with F1, the way DRS works, as long as the car ahead of you is within 1 second of a gap, you can open the wing in the designated zones. Here on this track, you'll see here Daniel Bontempo opening the DRS at the exit of turn 5. Next opportunity to do so will be at the exit of turn 14, leading into turn 15. They really are, especially for Silverstone. The soft tires can make a huge difference, but they also tend to degrade really, really quickly. Silverstone not super gritty, but because of the G-forces through a lot of the high-speed corners, especially here through this section that you're seeing with McLaren and Daniel Bontempo right now. This is turns 11, 12, 13, and 14. Very high speeds, off camber, and a lot of G-forces there, so a lot of tire wear. Scavenger gaining a position up into 7th. Dirty Liberal up into 5th now, as Pizza Dog in the Ferrari has dropped into 8th. And looking at the penalties currently, Ish Kabibble and General Whitney and the 2 Red Bulls, both of them with the 5-second penalty. I'm not sure why Automod picked up on the to them there, Azteca, but we got that approved, so no worries there. And you are correct, yeah, Maggots and Beckett's, they are definitely the big one. And SD Bookie now with a 3-second time penalty. That's going to be for track limits, so he's been warned multiple times by the automated system, has still continued to exceed track limits. Daniel Bontempo now as well with the 3-second penalty, and he's fallen back all the way to half a second, so 0.5 on our current race leader, McLaren. The next closest car here to Daniel Bontempo in second is Link's Worst Nightmare, who's a 1.5 seconds behind, and then Dirty Liberal in the other Williams, a second back on Link's Worst Nightmare. Absolutely, yeah, the history of Silverstone and the Royal Air Force involvement of the area. Ooh, and McLaren off pace there. Daniel Bontempo manages to go through and takes over race lead. But we'll see how long he can hold on to that. Spartacus now getting a 3-second penalty for track limits as well. The penalty's starting to fly. And aside from the incident on turn 1, lap 1, we haven't really had too much issues. A little bit of an issue for, I believe it was SD Bookie on lap 2, right here at turn 3, but just an isolated spin, and he was back underway easily. And currently scanning the track and times, looking for our closest battle. Looks like right now, really back here for about 11th between Grego 8776 and Sunder 96U. Pizza Dog now starting to catch up here for a 7th place battle with Original Paulie. And oh, Link's Worst Nightmare off pace. He's dropped from 3rd to 4th as Liberal moves up, so McLaren is in a Williams sandwich here. We'll see if McLaren can hold off the Williams cars and regain the lead, or if we have to take a strategy play here. And Lieutenant Spartacus moves up into 9th, overtaking the Alfa Romeo of Wubby's 210. And we have a caution at turn 3. Actually, looks like turn 4. My mistake. And that is the Red Bull of Ishkabibble. Looks like just an isolated spin. He is back underway, no damage. And McLaren trying to close that gap. 0.3 of a second behind right now. And now at 2.5 tenths, he's got the DRS advantage. Not able to make the move as we head into turn 6. And we've got a McLaren around. I believe that's going to be of Grego. And in fact, it is just an isolated incident there as well. That at the exit of turn 5. The hard tires only on lap 5. Probably going to see those start to come into play here a little bit in the next couple of laps as they start to warm up. McLaren now at 0.2 of a second and closing on Daniel Bontempo for the race lead. Moises overtaking the Alfa Romeo of Link's Worst Nightmare, so the AlphaTauris now coming into play with the Williams cars up front. And you can see McLaren with the DRS open. He overtakes Daniel Bontempo heading into turn 15, and he will regain race lead here on lap 6. That DRS definitely a huge advantage for McLaren there as he managed to get that gap all the way up to half a second. Oh, and a little bit of a twitch there, and he runs out wide at turn 18, and Liberal sneaks through as well as Daniel Bontempo, so Williams takes over 1-2. McLaren drops to 3rd. Meantime, back behind McLaren, Link's Worst Nightmare has regained 4th, and Moises has fallen back to 5th, but Link's Worst Nightmare is almost 2.5 seconds back on McLaren, so there's a decent gap here starting to form up and open up. Meanwhile, Moises there in 5th, only about 8 tenths back, so he's close enough for the DRS. And Scavenger in the McLaren looking to overtake Original Pauly, and he does on the straightaway leading into turn 6, so he will move up into 6th, and the Alpine drops back. Pizza Dog right behind Pauly as well. Pauly looks to be struggling a little bit here, off pace there at the exit of turn 7, heading into 8. Now here comes Sunder 96 to get involved as well, as well as Lieutenant Spartacus. Now we are seeing about a 4 or 5 car battle starting to form here. This is all for 6th place, and it looks like we've got Daniel Bontempo and Dirty Liberal swapping race lead, as Liberal will take over for the moment. Pizza Dog in the Ferrari will officially overtake Original Pauly as well and take over 6th. Pauly to 7th. Grego overtaking the Aston Martin of Stribs 88 for 12th. Scavenger and Lieutenant Spartacus having some contact there possibly, both off pace and falling back now, swapping positions though. Spartacus moves up into 10th, Scavenger down to 11th. We are starting to see a lot of action develop all over the grid right now. Oh, and Spartacus looked to almost go into the grass there for a brief moment, and Scavenger regains 10th place there in front of him. Terrible camera angle here. Unfortunately, I cannot force a change on that. So for Dirty Liberal, Fino Gaming, and General Whitney under green flag conditions, we're probably looking at a pit window right around, actually probably right about now, between lap 8 and probably 12 will be optimal. For the mediums, we're probably looking around closer to lap 12 to probably 15. Depending on the driver, we have seen some drivers push the mediums pretty far and then switch to a soft compound to basically sprint race out the last handful of laps. So we could see some drivers go as late as possibly like 18 to 20. We're starting to see a lot of shuffling around here across the grid. No one into pit just yet besides the last 3 cars, Ishkabibble, General Whitney, and SD Bookie. Those are our only drivers who have pit. Oh, and here comes Spartacus as well as Fino Gaming in for the first pit stops. An interesting strategy for Spartacus, unless he's got some front wing damage that I can't see on the camera. It's a little early on the mediums, so he may be going for a longer stint on the hards here, trying an undercut. Well, let's take a look and see what's going on up front. About 0.6 of a second now separating Daniel Bontempo from McLaren, who has taken back over race lead. And Dirty Liberal has fallen back to 3rd. Those soft tires likely going to start having a lack of grip anytime, if not already. And Ishkabibble around at turn 15 on his own there. Looks like he managed just to lose it in the grass, so didn't hit the wall, thankfully. So no damage for him, and he's back underway. Yeah, I would honestly say for the mediums, Azteca, probably anywhere from about lap 10 to 15 is probably going to be my best guesstimate on that. As Original Pauly now overtakes Sunder 96 for 7th, so the Mercedes of Sunder dropping back to 8th. And now 9th, as Wubby's 210 in the Alfa Romeo goes by as well. Sunder off pace, so I'm not sure if maybe he just had a bad trajectory entry into the corner. And Stribs 88, a 3-second penalty for track limits. Oh yeah, absolutely. Those softs are going to be begging for some help here. The way it works in F1 as well, the tire degradation is actually accelerated to match the race distance when enabled. So on a 50% race distance, you'll see the tires degrade at the same pace they would at 100%, as though if you were hitting that same percentage in the race. So if we were running 100% race distance, we would see the softs probably go till about maybe lap 20 to 25, give or take, 30 on the high end. And we can actually see here now, about 5 cars have made their official pit stop so far. The Alpine of Lieutenant Spartacus, the Aston Martin of SD Bookie, the Ferrari of Fino Gaming, and the 2 Red Bulls, Ish Kabibble and General Whitney. And now the AlphaTauri of Moises, about 3.5 seconds back on the 3rd place of Dirty Liberal, being chased down by the Alfa Romeo of Link's Worst Nightmare, only about half a second separating them. Scavenger overtaking Shribs 88 for 10th, so that last points position now in battle here almost halfway through this race. And we will likely see pit strategy start to come into play, and we have a McLaren around. Looks like that was going to be Scavenger in 10th. Just an isolated incident, probably just jumping the curb there and moving slowly, but no issue. When Dirty Liberal gaining on his teammate, and the other Williams of Daniel Bontempo was down to about 2 or 3 tenths of a second, now starting to fade back a little bit at 4 tenths. It's like right now, this is really our closest battle. Link's Worst Nightmare at 6 tenths back on Moises there in 4th and 5th. Daniel Bontempo with the DRS starting to pull in McLaren, and he looks to the inside going into turn 15. He's going to push McLaren a little bit wide there, and he does manage to overtake cleanly though. No contact, so McLaren will drop back to 2nd once again, and we'll see what happens here. We get ready to start lap 12. You will likely see some of these drivers start getting ready to think about pitting, especially Dirty Liberal. He's now ran 11 laps on the softs. Wouldn't be surprised if we see Liberal jump into the pit lane here anytime between now and probably the next maybe 3 laps. The big question though is, what strategy are he and Daniel Bontempo running to make sure they don't double stack? With being this close together, if they try to pit at the same time, whoever pits in second is going to get stalled out. General Whitney with a 3-second penalty for track limits as well. Fino Gaming getting his penalty cleared out, and Grego 8776 into pit. Link's Worst Nightmare now getting a penalty as well for track limits. A Aston Martin around there at turn 4. That would be, looks like Grego 8776 on his outlap. Spartacus setting the fastest lap of the race with a 129.947. You can see quite a few penalties here across the grid still. Ooh, and we've got a Red Bull having some difficulty, and it's General Whitney this time, and he's all the way against the wall. This is at the exit of turn 15, right at pit entry. And it looks like the front right side of the wing is damaged. McLaren has come into pit, so he will undercut both of the Williams drivers. And a little bit of an interesting strategy here. The other AlphaTauri of Moises has pit as well, and you can see his teammate just now pulling into the box. We'll see how this plays out. And he will get delayed slightly, but very marginally. So McLaren pulls away, and Moises will pull into the box, and he's back underway. So Moises coming in 4th. Looks like he will return back out in 6th here. And both Moises and McLaren and the AlphaTauris coming out on hard tires, as well as Link's Worst Nightmare in the Alfa Romeo, Pizza Dog in the Ferrari, Sunder 96 in the Mercedes, as well as Wubby's 210 and Scavenger, all pitting for those hard tires. So we're going to see a long stint here. Likely the only stop we're going to see in this race, unless there's a safety car. Not a huge concern here, because there is a ton, and I mean an absolute ton, of runoff space almost everywhere across this track. And Spartacus moving up into 11th as Grego 8776 gets another 3-second penalty here. And Lieutenant Spartacus overtakes the other McLaren of Scavenger, so the Alpine moving into the final points position here. We may see a decent battle here in the last half of this race. Unless the conditions change, right now it looks very bright and sunny. Not many clouds in the sky whatsoever to be concerned about, so don't believe there's any threat of rain possibly encroaching on the race. And the Williams of Dirty Liberal has come into pit. He's come in second place. And he has dropped to the Alpine of Pauly. So the only drivers left to pit now are the Williams of Daniel Bontempo and the Alpine of Original Pauly. McLaren now moving into third, back on a podium. His teammate not far behind, as the Williams of Liberal will come out officially back in fourth. See the Alfa Romeo of Linksworth Nightmare and the other AlphaTauri of Moises there right behind in fifth and sixth. And always remember to hydrate, especially when commentating a race like this. Yeah, so the way the penalties work is in order to clear a penalty, and you can only clear one penalty, as we see Daniel Bontempo getting a 5-second penalty now for pit entry. In order to clear a penalty, it has to be on a non-scheduled pit stop under green flag conditions. So you cannot clear a penalty during a safety car or red flag scenario. And it cannot be on a scheduled pit stop. So theoretically, for Daniel to clear all of his penalties, he would have to come through at least 2 more times. He could technically change out components the way F1 works. You can't pit without changing components, so he'd have to change tires. There is no refueling, so unfortunately, Azteca, no beer tonight, just water while commentating. Yeah, and any penalties unserved at the end of the race will be applied to the race end timer for each, affected driver. So if you have, a 3-second penalty for Pheno Gaming, for example, if you have someone who finishes behind you and they have no penalties and they finish 2 seconds behind you, they're going to overtake you. So if you finish first by 2 seconds with a 3-second penalty, that second place driver will officially get the win. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It looks like more than half the grid now has penalties. Spartacus also getting a penalty again for track limits. So let's actually take a look at these penalties. Daniel Bontempo with the highest penalties on track right now at a total of 8 seconds. So 5 seconds for speeding in pit lane and 3 seconds for track limits. Linksworth Nightmare with 3. Spartacus with 6 seconds. So that's going to be double track limits. And then Scavenger, Grego, Shribs, Pheno, and Ishkabibble, and General Whitney all with 3 seconds. And then SD Bookie with 6 seconds. So the only one not for track limits right now is that of Daniel Bontempo. So technically speaking, if the race was to end right now, because Dirty Liberal's 5.3 seconds back on Daniel, Liberal would overtake for second. And in fact, if that finished right now, Daniel would drop all the way into about 6th place, approximately, give or take maybe about a second. So that would be an absolute race killer for Daniel here, especially after his strong performance so far. And another interesting strategy move by Liberal, starting on the softs, he did pit around, I believe it was 14. So he's opted to go out on the mediums, so he's opting for the faster pace tire, but chancing the loss of grip in the last few laps here. And scanning our leaderboard here, we're starting to see kind of the general consensus with most of these races. After the pit stops, we start to see a bit of a spread out. Really, Daniel Bontempo and McLaren for race lead right now are closest. And then for third place between Liberal and Link's Worst Nightmare, and fifth of Moises. As we come to 10 laps to go here, as we start lap 17 of 26 for this evening's round 11 at Silverstone. Moises starting to lose some time to Link's Worst Nightmare, so Link starting to open up the gap a little bit behind him. Was at just about a second, but it looks like Moises now starting to gain again. Moises may have the DRS here. We will take a look. And in fact, he does. You can see that wing open, but Link's Worst Nightmare also has the DRS here behind Liberal. Grego and Spartacus now swapping back and forth. It looks like Spartacus is in the pits, though. He's on 8-lap-old soft, so he will have I believe this is his second stop now. Actually, that is his first stop. Pheno Gaming, Ishkabibble, and General Whitney all with 2 stops. And that because of the lap 1 incident at turn 1. Owen McLaren and Daniel Bontempo swapping spots for race lead once again. And it looked like McLaren may have gotten a little bit loose there coming out of turn 15. Maybe hitting that curb. So we'll see what he can do here. Technically, McLaren doesn't need to push. He just has to keep the pressure on Daniel and stay within, 8 seconds. And Dirty Liberal now fastest lap of the race at 1:29.585. And McLaren starting to close that gap. Now fading back a little bit here at turn 6 and 7. Definitely keeping the pressure on Daniel. Moises now gaining as Link's Worst Nightmare has dropped significantly to pretty Liberal now at 2.5 seconds. So right now, as it sits, there is a 13-second gap between 5th and 6th place. So if this race was to end right now as it sits, Link's Worst Nightmare would finish in 5th, even though it currently sits 4th because of a 3-second penalty. So Moises would move into 4th. However, looks like we're only at about, give or take, 6 seconds. So Daniel Bontempo would fall from race lead, winning the race, all the way to about 4th or 5th at the moment. So those intervals that you're seeing on the leaderboard there on the left-hand side, those are between the drivers in front and behind as appropriate there. So for McLaren, that 3/10 is for Daniel Bontempo. For Liberal, that 4.5 seconds is to McLaren. And for Moises, that 2.5 seconds is to Liberal, and so on and so forth. Like we may have had a disconnect there. I didn't quite catch the message on screen before it disappeared as I was reading the leaderboard. Yes, in fact, we have lost Grego 8776, so AI will take over the McLaren here at the moment unless Grego can rejoin. And McLaren sitting at 4. I'll make that 5/10, so half a second back on Daniel Bontempo as we come into the high-speed section of 11 through 13. Hard braking of 13 through 14. And you can see Sribs88 overtaking Grego. Scavenger in 10th right now, so McLaren would get 1 point at the moment. That final points position still up for grabs with about 8 laps to go. Still our closest battles right now here in the top 5. Race lead between McLaren and Daniel Bontempo, and Link's Horse Nightmare in 5th, and AlphaTauri of Moises in 4th. Dirty Liberal kind of sitting in no man's land all by himself right now. 2.5, almost 3 seconds back on McLaren in 2nd. Meanwhile, almost 5 seconds ahead of 4th place Moises in the other AlphaTauri. McLaren starting to fade back a little bit here at 8/10 now. And it looks like we've got some traffic just ahead of Daniel Bontempo. It will be back markers, so they will have to give way to the race leaders. So they will get penalties as well. And McLaren now back at 1.1 seconds, so we'll see what happens here in the closing laps. He's starting to fade back rather rapidly. I'm pretty sure he's aware of the 8-second penalty on Daniel, but if he keeps up this pace, he's going to lose that 8-second gap to his advantage here in the next few laps. So he's running out of time to keep the pressure on. Now 1.5 seconds. And you can see the back markers do ghost out. Ishkabibble getting another 3-second penalty for track limits as well. Vino Gaming moving up into 14th, overtaking Spartacus. And now the closest battle on track, this for 4th place. The Alfa Romeo of Link's Worst Nightmare trying to chase down the AlphaTauri of Moises. However, even if Link's Worst Nightmare overtakes Moises, he's still got to finish 3 seconds ahead because of the track limits penalty. And Grego has rejoined. We'll see if he can regain control of the vehicle here. Thankfully, F1 does allow drivers who drop out the ability to rejoin and regain control of their vehicle. And McLaren now still sitting in 2nd, 2 seconds back on Daniel. Meanwhile, Liberal has closed that gap from about 4 seconds to 2.5 seconds approximately. So we may see some time here yet to be made up. General Whitney, another 3-second penalty for track limits. We are seeing more penalties starting to be dished out across the grid here in the closing stages of Silverstone. And Link's Worst Nightmare sitting about half a second back. He does get the DRS here coming down through turn 5 into turn 6. Manages to close it to about 0.2 of a second leading into 6. And McLaren safely sitting in 2nd place now, 2.5 seconds back. Meanwhile, Liberal starting to close that gap. Was at 2 seconds, now almost 1.5 seconds in closing, it looks like. And we have a caution due to one of the McLarens, that of Scavenger, who has apparently retired from the session here. It looks like he did pull into pit lane before he retired, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there. There could have been damage to the vehicle at pit entry. And it's not even Scavenger. It looks like Grego is the one who pulled into pit lane, so my mistake there. It looks like Scavenger has opted to retire. Not sure exactly what happened. His car will likely be removed before we get a visual on it here. It looks like Fino is going to be the first one there, as Scavenger has left the session as well. So Scavenger will be our first DNF of tonight's race. A very late stage DNF as well, as we just start lap 22. Excuse me, as we start lap 23, and we see Daniel Bontempo coming into pit, as well as McLaren. McLaren going for the soft tires. He's going to go for the race fast lap. Oh, and Dirty Liberal also pitting a massive time delay there for Daniel, so that will slow Liberal down drastically. And we have a safety car, and that is why we're seeing pit lane so busy. That is going to be because of Scavenger retiring from the session there unexpectedly. It looks like the one kind of narrow area is what impacted that. So we have a very late stage safety car here, lap 23 of 26. And even though Daniel did pit, he will likely still... No, actually, it looks like they did give him a reduction of his time penalties. So that time penalty down to 3 seconds for him. And SD Bookie, Lieutenant Spartacus, Ish Kabibble, and General Whitney, the only drivers with more than 3 second penalty. Link's Worst Nightmare still with 3 seconds, as well as Sribs 88, Fino Gaming, Grego, and that will be the only ones. So yeah, we will see a sprint here. We'll probably have about approximately 2 laps under the safety car, because typically the game will try to push the safety car in when there's 2 laps or less left in the race. It usually doesn't even deploy the safety car if there's only like 3 or 4 laps left in the race. So if you are just joining us here in the late stages of the race, welcome in. We are on lap 23 of 26 at Silverstone for F1 League Night with TX Racing. And an interesting turn of events, as one of the drivers did leave the session unexpectedly, which is what's resulted in the safety car. Our current race leader, Daniel Bontempo in the Williams, with a 3 second penalty, so he will have to try to open up the gap for the final couple laps here. And we will probably see, I believe at Silverstone, the message for the safety car coming in will come right around, I believe it's turn 14. That way the safety car has time to pull away. So that long straightaway towards the end of the lap here, we should hopefully see it here this time by, as it will leave us with 2 laps left in the race. And if you are new to the channel, welcome in. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, or X as it is now commonly referred to. I do post updates there for the TX Racing League frequently, as well as for streaming and special events that I may be working on. So make sure you follow me there for the most up-to-date information. And after tonight, TX is off next Saturday in observance of Thanksgiving in the US. So we will be back on December the 2nd. And after tonight, TX heads to Hungary for the Hungarian Ring Grand Prix, round number 12. And there's the message right at turn 14. And safety car is in this time by. We will have a 2-lap sprint shootout basically at this point. And it's going to be a very close, tight finish here. I would not be surprised if we see some bumping around going into turn 1, even though it's a single file restart. And safety car officially into pit lane. Daniel is throttle controlled at the moment by the game, so he'll have an opportunity to accelerate fully here in just a moment. Oh, no worries, Scavenger. Welcome back into chat. Sorry to hear about the luck there, as we are back to green flag racing. And it looks like turn one actually fairly clean at the moment. No major issues. McLaren putting the pressure on Daniel as Dirty Liberal puts the pressure on McLaren, and Link's Worst Nightmare right behind Liberal. Moises moving up into 5th, overtaking Original Polly in the Alpine. And he will try to push and chase down Link. He does have to finish within 3 seconds in order to take over that 4th place finish. So if Lynx can open up the gap, he has an opportunity to stay within a podium potential finish. And Daniel starting to pull away here. There will be no DRS because DRS is disabled for the first 3 laps after a safety car or full course caution. So virtual safety car or actual safety car, we must wait 3 laps, so there is no DRS advantage here for the 2 closing laps. This will come down completely to driver tactics. And the camera focused on McLaren because it gives us the best vantage point right now to see the action for the top 3. Ribs 88 with a 3-second penalty for track limits again. And through turn 18, McLaren is down as Daniel Bontempo with a 128.337 sets the fast lap for the final lap start here. And McLaren still within a close enough range that he can make a move here if Daniel makes any mistakes. He is still within 3 seconds, so right now if the race was to finish, Daniel would fall to 3rd. However, Moises would move up to 4th, but he is 2.5 seconds back on Link's Worst Nightmare. And it looks like Grego around at the exit of turn 5, just a little slow though, so he's back underway. Daniel Bontempo still holding pace at 0.6 up over McLaren. McLaren, our pole sitter at the start of the race. And looks like McLaren trying to reel him in here into the S's. And this is going to come down to the line for finishing 2nd and 3rd between Liberal and McLaren, I believe. I don't think McLaren's going to have enough pace. He has closed into within half a second, though. 4.5 tenths. So it's going to be now or never. And he's right there. He's managed to close that gap now. But we are through turn 18, and Daniel Bontempo is going to come across for the win, technically, but McLaren will get awarded the win because of the 3-second penalty. Daniel drops to 3rd. Link's Worst Nightmare finishes 4th, but misses out on holding it by 0.3 of a second, so he will drop to 5th. Pizza Dog will come across in 6th, Under 96 in 7th, Wubby's 210 in 8th, Original Polly in 9th, and SD Bookie rounding out our top 10. So a very wild finish with only 1 safety car and 1 DNF here in Silverstone, and a very solid performance from all of tonight's drivers. Aside from the major incident on lap 1, turn 1, really just some minor isolated incidents, and Sribs disqualified for stopping. However, I believe he had already crossed the finish line, so I'm not sure why he had been disqualified there. We will see our official results, including the penalties, here in just a moment. And first, our podium here with with McLaren taking the race win, and Dirty Liberal taking 2nd, and Daniel Bontempo closing out the podium for Williams with 3rd. So our official results with penalties included: McLaren will come across in 1st for AlphaTauri, Dirty Liberal and Williams for 2nd, Daniel Bontempo in the other Williams for 3rd, and then rounding out the top 5 is Moises in 4th and Link's Worst Nightmare in 5th. And again, our only DNF going to Scavenger here because of the disqualification, or actually, sorry, the DNF for retiring. Scribbs was outside of points. Technically, race was finished. It does show that he's disqualified, but
he should be awarded 16th, and Scavenger should be awarded 17th, I believe. We will update Twitter, so make sure you follow me there. I do want to say a huge shout out to everyone for joining tonight and watching. If it's your first time, make sure to hit that follow button. We will be back on the 2nd of December for the next round at the Hungarian Ring for round 12 of the TX Racing F1 23 season.